So to continue on, decades ago, it used to be that sovereign wealth funds were exclusive to resource-rich countries such as Kuwait, Norway, and the United Arab Emirates as a means to protect the value and maximize the earnings on revenue surpluses from commodity exports so as to extend its benefits to posterity. Today, however, this is no longer the case. More than 50 countries are now with sovereign wealth funds, many of whom belong to the same level of economic development as the Philippines, such as Indonesia, Vietnam, and Kenya, to mention a few. Capitalization is no longer exclusive to surplus revenues generated by natural resources, but has now grown to include varying sources, including budgetary contributions, as in the case of the Indonesia Investment Authority. Also, the objective for establishing sovereign wealth funds has broadened to include other economic goals, such as to help stabilize the country's economic base through asset diversification, to limit the effects of capital flows on money supply, to increase returns via international portfolio investments, and to facilitate long-term development. In fact, some countries have more than one sovereign wealth.
Be, galing mo, be. Ang meron akong mic nito.
May party line. More than one sovereign wealth fund to serve different objectives. Singapore, for example, created two distinct funds. One, the GIC, whose objective is to preserve and enhance Singapore's international purchasing power over the long term, and is therefore invested heavily on foreign assets, while Temasek, whose economic stability goal is more aligned with holdings of domestic assets. Sovereign wealth funds are no longer defined simply as government-owned vehicles investing their capital overseas. Today, the industry is highly complex with mixed forms of legal structure, ownership, and portfolios. Governments use sovereign wealth funds to meet their particular economic goals, and a fund's objectives can evolve with time to suit the country's needs. The Philippines will greatly benefit from having its own sovereign wealth fund, especially with respect to boosting our long-term economic productivity. Having a sovereign wealth fund will help advance our infrastructure development. Following the example of Indonesia Investment Authority, we can structure a sovereign wealth fund that allows co-investments and partnerships with foreign entities and thereby attract large foreign capital into our high-priority sectors. We can use a sovereign wealth fund to attract the best talents from the private sector and to gain membership in sovereign wealth fund associations that may develop into partnerships with other sovereign wealth funds for local projects. The Philippines, being one of the Southeast Asia's fastest growing economies, has a broad range of physical, financial, and human capital assets. With the country's strong growth coupled with its sustainable development plan and of course, the economic liberalization measures passed by Congress, now is the time to establish the proposed Maharlika Investment Fund. The overall purpose for the establishment of the Maharlika Investment Fund is to optimize the use of government financial assets and promoting their intergenerational management in order to maximize returns and advance the fund's developmental objectives. The specific mandate of the MIF would define the investment strategies through the creation of sub-funds with specific investment and risk management frameworks and investment horizons. A fund with a developmental strategic or objective with a long-term horizon may be created to promote economic development by making strategic and profitable investments. On the other hand, a fund with a commercial objective will obtain optimal absolute return and achievable financial gains on its investments. The Maharlika Investment Fund shall be founded on the Santiago Principles, which identify a framework of generally accepted principles that properly reflect appropriate governance and accountability arrangements, as well as the conduct of investment practices by sovereign wealth funds on a prudent and sound basis. The Santiago Principles seek to ensure that through the pursuit of these practices, the sovereign wealth funds continue to bring economic and financial benefits to home countries, recipient countries, and the international financial system. The following are the key themes embodied in the Santiago Principles. First is the establishment of a governance framework that will allow the fund to fulfill its mandates and achieve its objectives. Second, relevant information of the fund should be clear and disclosed publicly. Third, the business processes and systems shall be grounded on clearly defined rules and procedures and must satisfy regulatory requirements. Finally, the fund should target to provide a risk-adjusted operating model. The MIC, or the Maharlika Investment Corporation, shall be created as a corporate vehicle for the purpose of mobilizing and utilizing the Maharlika Investment Fund to make investments that will maximize returns and contribute to the sustainable economic growth of the country. The initial capitalization of the MIC shall be sourced from the Land Bank of the Philippines and the Development Bank of the Philippines. Land Bank shall invest 50 billion pesos and DBP shall contribute 25 billion pesos. Each government financial institution may increase its investment above the required equity contribution, and they shall be entitled to prudential and other regulatory reliefs as may be determined by the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas to ensure their financial soundness while contributing to the overall objective of the fund. In addition, subsequent annual contributions from GOCCs and other sources to the fund shall be provided as follows. For the first 2 years, the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas shall remit 100% of its declared dividends to the fund. In the succeeding years, the BSP shall remit 50% of its declared dividends to the fund and the remaining 50% to the national government until the increase in the BSP's capitalization has been fully paid. Thereafter, BSP shall remit 100% of its declared dividends to the fund. Moreover, PAGCOR and other government-owned gaming operators shall contribute at least 10% of gross gaming revenue streams. Lastly, other sources of funding shall include royalties and special assessments on natural resources based on the fiscal regime to be implemented by the national government, proceeds from privatization of government assets, and public borrowings. To ensure that the fund will be able to grow, withdrawals from the fund shall be made only after at least 5 years of investment activities. The notice period for any withdrawal is 1 year or shortened as determined by the board. The capital of the MIC shall not be withdrawn if its effect would be to diminish the MIF to an amount less than the real value of the MIF at its inception. To ensure the sustainability of the fund, sound and credible investment and risk management strategies shall be developed. The board shall ensure that policies formulated are consistent with the objectives of the fund, and this shall be subject to periodic reviews. The investment strategy shall take into account the expectations for returns and the fund's risk tolerance around specific activities like co-investments. Moreover, with the investment strategy, there shall be a clear method for determining performance, not just at the portfolio level, but also for the asset class and even at the individual investment level. In order to prudently manage the fund's risk, it shall focus on generating sustainable, risk-adjusted returns over the long term, properly identify and manage risks, ensure the resilience of its balance sheet, and finally, the MIC can look into investments in emerging megatrends such as fintech, ESG, and healthcare. The following shall serve as allowable investments of the fund, subject to strict compliance with investment and risk management guidelines. Cash, foreign currencies, metals, and other tradable commodities, fixed income instruments issued by sovereigns, quasi-sovereigns, and supranationals, domestic and foreign corporate bonds, listed or unlisted equities, whether common, preferred, or hybrids, Islamic investments such as sukuk bonds, joint ventures or co-investments, mutual and exchange-traded funds invested in underlying assets, commercial real estate and infrastructure projects, loans and guarantees to or participation into joint ventures or consortiums with Filipino and foreign investors, and other investments as may be approved by the board. As for governance, the MIC shall be governed by a board of directors with 15 members chaired by the Secretary of Finance. Other members include the CEO of the MIC, the President and CEO of Land Bank and DBP, 6 regular members representing the contributors to the fund, with the seats distributed in proportion to their corresponding investments, and 5 independent directors from the private sector, the academe, business sector, and investment sector. The rules on appointment and termination of the Board of Directors shall be included in the implementing rules and regulations. An advisory body will be established to advise and assist the Board of Directors in the formulation of the general policies related to investment and risk management. The advisory body shall not take part in the management or control of the fund. It shall be composed of the Secretary of the Department of Budget and Management, the Secretary of the National Economic and Development Authority, the President of the Philippine Stock Exchange, and the President of the Bankers Association of the Philippines. In addition, a risk management unit shall be organized by the board, which shall ensure that the MIC is taking the appropriate measure to achieve a prudent balance between risk and reward in both ongoing and new business activities. It shall be composed of 5 members. There will be 1 professional with proven competence and experience in finance, economics, investment, business management, or law, 2 senior executives of the MIC, 1 independent director, and 1 auditor. On exemptions and privileges, under the proposed bill, the MIC shall be granted exemptions from specific regulations to ensure operational efficiency and independence. The MIC shall be exempted from the GOCC Governance Act of 2011, except for sections of the said law on the fiduciary duties of the board and officers, full disclosure, and special audit. This is in consideration of the need for flexibility to operate, function, employ, and retain employees to ensure the successful implementation of the goals of the MIC. The following transactions and assets of the MIC and the MIF exempt from local and national taxes, direct and indirect, as well as custom duties include all funds, assets, and properties, all revenues, income, or investment earnings, as well as accruals thereto, the purchase of supplies, equipment, papers, or documents, and the importation of supplies and equipments. The exemptions granted shall be utilized directly, exclusively, and solely for the transactions of the MIC and the MIF as distinct legal entities and not for the purposes of its executives, employees, third parties, and other distinct taxable entities. Moreover, the procurement or engagement of the professional or technical services needed in the selection of authorized investments shall be exempted from the provisions of the Government Procurement Reform Act and its implementing rules and regulations. The competitive selection process and guidelines for the procurement of professional and technical services shall be approved by the MIC Board. To attract the highly qualified pool of Filipino professionals, both locally and overseas, the officers and employees of the MIC shall be exempt from the Salary Standardization Act. Their compensation shall be set based on an objective classification consistent with international standards for compensating investment management professionals managing global assets. On the distribution of net profits of the MIC, at least 25% shall be distributed for poverty and subsistence subsidies. The remainder shall be remitted to the national government for earmarking for social welfare programs and projects, excluding infrastructure projects, provided that the share of the net profits remitted to the national government shall not exceed the proportion of investments to the total fund attributable to the national government. Financial reporting and audit measures are also in place to ensure transparency and accountability. First, financial reporting shall be in accordance with the pertinent provisions of the Act, the IRR, and the International Financial Reporting Standards and Principles. Second, there will be an internal audit independent from the management of the MIC and shall be under the direct control and supervision of the Board of Directors. Third, there will be an internationally recognized auditing firm that shall serve as the external auditor of the fund to examine its financial statements. Fourth, the books and accounts of the MIC shall be subject to the examination and audit of the Commission on Audit. Fifth, there will be a joint congressional oversight committee composed of 5 members each from the House of Representatives and the Senate, which will be tasked to oversee, monitor, and evaluate the implementation of this act. Your Honors, the Maharlika Investment Fund has the potential to contribute to the strong growth trajectory of the Philippines through investments in the country's critical developmental projects. Not only will this promote the effective intergenerational management of the country's financial resources, but more importantly, to improve the welfare of future generations of Filipinos. Ultimately, the Philippines will benefit from a well-structured, robust, and effective sovereign wealth fund, as this will serve as a long-term investment vehicle that will attract foreign investments, boost national savings, and advance economic growth and social development. As we support the creation of this measure, we shall continue to work hand in hand with Congress to ensure the passage of the best version of the Maharlika Investment Fund. Thank you, and maraming salamat po.